Hey, folks. Welcome to the show. Thank you for joining me. Hello to everybody who is here right now as we are streaming live in the live chat. As always, if you have questions or comments that you want me to respond to or whatever, please hold on to those in the live chat until a bit later in the show. Once I get through my pre-submitted patron questions, then I will be spending time hanging out with the live chat and answering questions in the live chat. So just if you have anything in the live chat that you want me to see, just hang on to it until a bit later in the show, and we'll go from there. So first, let's turn to the questions that were submitted ahead of time by my Patreon patrons. And the first one of those, because Dr. Babylon forgot to fill in his question again before the show started, comes from our pal, Some Random Geek, who says, Anarchism 101 lesson in under 300 words. The state, that group in which has a monopoly on the legitimized use of violence in a geographical area. Another useful definition is the method in which coercive authority and hierarchy are maintained. When anarchists are talking about states, we're not talking about organizations, social services, or any of the good things that governments do. I want roads, tap water, and libraries too. You don't need hierarchies to maintain those things. So yes, anarchists do build roads. Why wouldn't they? What prevents them from doing that? And liberals' lack of imagination is not the answer. I want to end capitalism. And since the modern state arose out of capitalism, and because of it, we have to get rid of the state to get rid of capitalism. True, we elected leaders into the state with the limit choices of whoever raised the most money or has the most financial backing, and they will campaign on, I will get rid of the terrible first-past-the-post electoral system, as Justin Trudeau did, but then walk it back once in office. Clinton and Obama campaign on progressive platforms, yes, we can, but went back to the center-right once in office. Joe Biden will do the same. Are you okay with someone else deciding all of your meals for you and when to eat, even if you elected that person? If not, then why are you okay with someone else making the rules for you? How come liberals don't realize that the state is an unjustifiable coercive hierarchy? Why do liberals agree that having kings and queens are bad, yet don't have a problem with electing their leaders? Do liberals honestly believe that senators, mayors, governors, congressfolks, and presidents are better than them? If you don't like those questions, here's an entirely different one. Have you seen Nick Anderson's Lego Rewind finale Bionicle video? It's on his YouTube channel, Nick on the Planet Ripple. His Planet Ripple comics are quite good too. Nick is our pal and another patron of mine. Thanks for shouting out Nick there. And I haven't gotten around to watching that video yet, so I apologize to Nick for not watching the video yet. But, well, no, it's not. Do I think that king or that senators and mayors, etc., are better than me or better than other people? No, but we elect them to do jobs that we do not want to do ourselves, or at least that most of us don't want to do ourselves. As a libertarian anarchist, you presumably would like for the tasks that are sort of delegated to elected officials to be done directly by the people. But most people aren't on board with that kind of a system. Most people are okay with electing leaders or electing representatives to carry out the functions of government, the necessary functions of government, in the name of the people, as opposed to the people having to do everything directly themselves. As we've talked about many times before, I am okay with that system. I am not okay with the various ways in which that system has been corrupted and co-opted and abused, but on paper, I think it's a perfectly legitimate, fine system, and there's no reason why it can't work at least as well as any other system I've ever heard proposed. Because, I mean, your preferred system of a more direct democracy, that is, I don't see how that would be immune to abuse and corruption and people taking control of it and using it for nefarious means or to enrich themselves or whatever either. Like, I don't know. Benjamin Franklin said democracy is the worst system of government ever devised, except for all the other ones. I feel like there will never be a perfect system. There will never be a system that will be completely immune from from corruption or the danger of it being exploited for the benefit of the few at the expense of the many. But on paper, the system we have, and when I say we, I don't just mean specifically the United States. I'm not a constitution fetishizer. I mean, generally speaking, the democracies of the world, representative democracies, and all the different sort of variations that we find it throughout the world. I think that's as good of a system for governing large groups of people as we've ever come up with. So it's not so much. It's not that we think that our leaders or our representatives are better. It's that we, in theory, we are delegating the tasks of running the government to them because we are either unwilling or unable to do that ourselves. And as to, why do liberals? How did you put it here? How come liberals don't realize that the state is an unjustifiable coercive hierarchy? It's not that liberals don't realize it; it's that they see it differently. It's an honest disagreement. It's not a failure to see what I mean. I think most people, if they had it explained to them, could understand what your point of view is. They would just have a different point of view. Next question is from Francois Lacombe. Hi, Steve. After your late seating review of Superman Returns, happy birthday, by the way, and the comment you made about Man of Steel, I was wondering what you thought of the movie Brightburn, the story of a Superman-like being sent to Earth not to inspire and protect, but to conquer and enslave. I have not gotten around to seeing Brightburn yet, unfortunately. I have not had time to watch it, so I can't speak to it as a film. I don't know how good of a movie it is, but I recall very vividly when I saw the first trailer for it, I thought, oh, it's like they're doing Superman for Man of Steel, only they're making him a bad guy on purpose instead of accidentally because they don't know how to write for a character like Superman, and they just wind up making him a supervillain without realizing it. Brightburn is like, oh no, they're doing that on purpose. And I thought that was a really interesting idea, but I haven't seen the movie yet, so I don't know. Next question is from Nicholas Gross. Is Chief O'Brien the only enlisted personnel in Starfleet? Almost all of the characters we see, particularly in TNG, are officers. Captain, commander, lieutenant, even lowly ensign are all officers. Even in the episode Lower Decks, all of those characters are ensigns, if I recall correctly, fresh from the academy. Presumably, there are some enlisted personnel among the crew and various red shirts that get knocked off, but Chief O'Brien is the only one who gets more than a few passing lines for the main characters to interact with. This provides an elitist and top-heavy view of Starfleet. Well, I agree with that. You don't really consider it until you think about it, and a character like Chief O'Brien kind of encourages you to think about it, because you're like, wait a minute, Chief O'Brien is an enlisted man, which means presumably there are lots more enlisted personnel, but we never see them. So it does give you the impression that we're seeing an elitist perspective on Starfleet. But yeah, O'Brien is the only major character that I can think of who is an enlisted person, but we do see enlisted people throughout the show. I mean, you do see, mostly in the background in TNG, you see people who are referred to as crewmen. I think, one of the ones that I can name who actually is given a character name is from the episode The Drumhead, Simon Tarses, who is a crewman assigned to work in sickbay, and he's the guy who turns out to have falsified his application to Starfleet. And said that his grandfather was Vulcan when he was really Romulan, and he got in a lot of trouble during Admiral Satie's witch hunt. And he was enlisted. And he and Picard have a really nice scene together where part of what they talk about is the fact that he didn't want to go to the academy and study for 4 years to become an officer. He became an enlisted crewman because he wanted to get out in space right away. So Tarses would be an enlisted personnel, a non-commissioned officer that we see in addition to O'Brien. But O'Brien is the only major character that I can think of. I guess maybe Rand, Yeoman Rand in TOS, because I don't know if they ever established that she was an officer, and I don't know enough about naval rank structure off the top of my head to know if a yeoman is a rank, or if that's like an enlisted person, or if that's an officer just serving a position. I don't know, but I don't think that Rand was ever definitively established as a proper officer either. But yeah, O'Brien is the only major regular character that I can think of who is not an officer. Next question from Matthew Royker. Some fans like the darker Star Trek. Some like traditional Trek. What if a series was set exclusively in the mirror universe? It could be half serialized and it can be dark, but maybe traditional fans will be more accepting since the mirror universe was established in TOS. Also, I don't know if someone has already asked, but do you suppose Corona is why all doors are automatic in the 24th century? That's a guy I had not put that together, but perhaps you're right. Perhaps we realize how we can stop the spread of disease after the coronavirus by just having all the doors be automatic, and that's how that happens, and it just carries straight through to the 23rd and 24th centuries. I don't know. Although that doesn't quite work, does it? Because in the Enterprise in the 22nd century, we see them pushing the buttons. They don't have the automatic doors yet. They have to push the button to open the door. So it doesn't quite work, but we'll forget about that. Who cares? It's a funny idea. It's a funny suggestion. And as for a show set in the mirror universe, I mean, I think maybe some people might like that. To me, it would depend on the show. I mean, it would depend on if it was a good show. I would watch it. And if it was a good show, I would probably like it. But there's nothing about the mirror universe in and of itself that I find innately compelling. If your pitch to me for a Star Trek show is a series set in the mirror universe, that by itself doesn't really excite me. It's just like the upcoming show with the Giorgio show that's going to be supposedly a Section 31 series. Section 31 show doesn't really excite me. It needs more than that. I'll watch it, and I really, I love Michelle Yeoh. I think Mirror Universe Giorgio is a really great character, so I'll definitely be up for watching the show. But I'm not one of the people there. It seems like there's a certain subset of the fan base that is crazy about Section 31 and is just interested in anything about Section 31, and I'm just not one of those people. If your pitch is Section 31 Star Trek show, I'm like, all right, I'll give it a try, but I don't feel automatically drawn to it. Same thing with the mirror universe. But if it's a good show, yeah, absolutely. John Burnsy, hey Steve, so the weather outside is frightful because in Canada the term ice hockey is redundant. Anywho, how do you expect people to want to spend their whole lives and the lives of their grandchildren, of their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren traveling to a new planet? I know many talk about Star Trek, where warp speed really works, but for far longer than people expect, I'm sure space travel will be in generational ships, which would have to be massive. I know there's people today on Earth who get upset about a blade of grass being stepped on, but the resources needed to build these ships would be massive, and upgrades to them after the first group head off and report needed changes can only make ships like these more and more unfeasible. And the more united the world becomes, speaking of an oxymoron, the less poor people around the world will be consulted. What do you foresee, oh great foreseer, about humanity's future in space colonization? Is this a word Whitey can still use? I think in the context you are using it, it is fine. Although as a fellow Whitey, it's not necessarily for me to decide. But I don't think anything like that is ever going to happen. I don't, unless there is some kind of environmental disaster on this planet that forces us to go out into space in massive numbers and necessitates the building of huge generational colony ships that will travel across the great vastness of space for hundreds of years before they reach their destination. Unless something forces us to do that in order to in order to preserve our species in the face of extinction, I don't see us ever doing that. I think it's a great idea for a sci-fi story. I think it's a really fantastic premise, but in real life, do I ever foresee humanity doing that unless we are absolutely forced to by circumstances beyond our control? No. And the main reason for it is because it would be incredibly expensive, and it would require us to plan so far into the future that we would be planning beyond the lifetimes of the people making the plans. And we are just terrible at that. Historically speaking, we are just really terrible at that. So I don't foresee that ever happening. That doesn't mean that I don't think there will ever be attempts by human beings to reach other planets. I think that probably will happen. And who knows, maybe there might even be colonization of planets in our solar system. Maybe we can figure out a way to actually have permanent human colonies on the moon or on Mars or something like that. But in terms of outside our solar system, where you would have to travel for years or decades to even get there, I don't think that will ever happen on a large scale like you're describing, unless there is really, unless the choice is we either do that or we go extinct. And that's kind of a depressing thought for those of us who are super into space travel and would love to imagine a future where humanity reaches out, into the stars. But that's just my impression, Next question is from General Contact Unit Problem Child. One of the things that radicalized me was listening to a podcast series that explained the history of neoliberalism. I've since read actual books that laid out the same trends in more detail. The conclusion of both was that if something doesn't change, we're heading for a capitalist police state. The rich will live in gated communities protected by private militias, while the rest of us languish on the outside, surviving as best we can until climate change kills us. Unless there's some major paradigm shift in electoral politics, the only difference between which party is elected is how far off that nightmare future is, i.e. maybe it'll be pushed back like half a decade if Dems win. Do you think there will ever come a point where Democrats realize things are so dire that they have to stop putting up pro-corporate candidates in order to avoid a future like that? P.S. I know this might technically count as a second question, but Mia Mulder says she wants to know what you had for dinner. I'll answer it because it just seems so completely unrelated to the foregoing question, and also because I really like Mia. So, you know what? Mia can PM me if she wants to know what I had for dinner. God damn it! What was Mia sending you with the questions for? No, I had my wife made a delicious vegetarian homemade slippery pot pie, and we had that for dinner. And it was, oh God, it was so good. So that's what I had for dinner. So if Mia's interested in what I had for dinner, it's that. And do I think the Democrats will ever realize that? I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't want to hold my breath waiting for it. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that all is lost. I mean, those kinds of major paradigm shifts in our electoral politics have arguably happened in the past. There have been times in American history before this present time when, again, arguably, depending on how you define your terms or what your standards are, that the American people and our elected representatives and leaders have risen to the occasion in big ways. The response to the Great Depression, for instance, and the progressive reforms of the early 20th century that were extensive and radical in many ways. I mean, so we've done it before, and it would be nice if we could do it again. It does feel like our standards are perpetually being lowered and lowered, and we're constantly being told by our elected officials from both major parties, oh, don't aim so high, aim lower, aim lower, aim lower. And it would be nice to have elected officials and candidates for elected office that start doing the opposite and saying, no, we need to start aiming higher. We need to start demanding more of ourselves. We need to work harder to make a better future. We can't just keep training ourselves to accept less and less and less. But I don't think it's impossible that will happen. I think you see little glimmers of it here and there, that it could eventually take hold. And I mean, I hope it does. I don't think it's necessarily, a foregone conclusion that all is lost and that we're doomed for, the dystopian future that you're describing. I mean, it's possible, but I don't think it's a foregone conclusion. Next question is from David Colby. So last week I mentioned the Dems being controlled opposition, and it does sound kind of conspiratorial, but I've been thinking about it, and you can get the effects of controlled opposition without there actually being a conspiracy through that most devilish of all right-wing tactics, class solidarity. No, seriously, think about it. Remember back in 2016 when Caitlyn Jenner came out in favor of Trump, despite being one of the most visible trans women in the world at the time? Well, that's because her class interests, being wealthy, aligned with Trump's class interests. There's a definite class divide in the Democrats, and the richer, more connected, older Democrats seem pretty hell-bent on sabotaging any movement left through any means necessary. Not because they're in the pocket of some nefarious organization, but because they're rich. They're protecting their class interests, like how ants can all cooperate in moving a big rock without anything more than simple imperatives and chemical trails. Except the chemical trails are money. This is why we have to fucking primary the bastards out of the party, or, violent revolution. But I'm lazy. Let's do the primary thing. Well, I agree with that. I would also prefer to do the primary thing. But I think you're right. I think it's much more likely that it's not a conspiracy, and it's not the fact that, all the politicians are in so-and-so's pocket. I think there's a lot, and not to say that money isn't a problem in politics, because it's a massive problem in politics, but it's not a problem in the sense of, so-and-so has bought all the politicians. I think that probably happens a lot less often than people think. It's more a matter of the people with money are the ones that have the influence and the ones who get to sort of set the agenda. It's not that they are flat out, like, overtly corrupt and buying the loyalty of certain politicians. It's like you're saying in your question, their interests coincide and they just naturally sort of fall in and work together, or move toward the same goals because they benefit from the same stuff. And people with less money, who may have different goals or different priorities, are shut out from the process because they can't buy their way in, or they're outnumbered or outspent by other people. So it's definitely a problem. And I think the way you describe it is probably closer to the way things are most of the time. It's not an actual organized conspiracy or a case of, a particular person or particular organization buying the loyalty of a politician. It's as you say, it's a form of class solidarity. I think you're right. And we do have to primary the bastards. I agree very, very vociferously that we need to vote for the most progressive candidate on the ballot in every race, in every election, especially in primaries, because that's how you get more progressive candidates on the general election ballot that then have a shot, hopefully, of getting into the actual office and doing some good. So yeah, I agree with you completely. Next question is from Mandingo NZ. Hey, Steve. Hello from New Zealand. I am a new member, so apologize if this question has been answered before. What would you have liked to have seen as a story arc if there had been a season 8 of DS9? Thanks for your great content. I love it all. I have got a lot of backlog to go through. Kind regards, Paul. Well, thank you very much, Paul, for becoming a patron recently. I appreciate that. If I wanted to do season 8 of DS9, I would love to have seen them go back and circle around and focus on Bajor joining the Federation again. I'm one of those Deep Space Nine fans that, even though I love the Defiant, like the Defiant is maybe my favorite ship in all of Star Trek, and I love Worf on the show, and I love the Dominion War and all of that. I think all of that came out really well. I'm just a massive fan of the show in general. I really, really liked the early seasons, and I loved all of the Bajoran politics stuff, and I loved the depiction of Bajor as sort of a destroyed world that was rebuilding itself, and the Bajor Cardassia stuff. I loved all of that, so I would be very interested in going back and refocusing on Bajor. Now that the war is over, now that we've defeated the Dominion and Cardassia has... the Cardassian Union government, the fascist Cardassian government, has been toppled. I would love to go back to refocus on Bajor, and maybe focus on how Bajor and the new Cardassia work together, because now, weirdly, they have something in common. Now, Bajor has been rebuilding itself for the last 7 or 8 years after the Cardassian withdrawal, and now Cardassia is completely laid waste as a result of the alliance with the Dominion, and now they are building themselves back up from nothing as well. So they have a lot in common with the Bajorans that they never had before. And could the Bajorans find some way to forgive the Cardassians for the evils that were permitted to them? How would the Cardassian people feel about the Bajarans now? Would they resent Bajor for now being better off than they are? Like, there's all kinds of really interesting ways that you could go and all kinds of interesting issues you could explore on the setting of a place like DS9, which could now be depicted as kind of in between these two places. And Starfleet kind of being caught in the middle of its ally Bajor and its former enemy Cardassia as they both try to rebuild and forge this new destiny. And I would love to see that be. I mean, obviously that's not a story. That's just a concept, and I don't have any plots in mind or anything. But just that as sort of the milieu of season 8 of DS9, assuming that it would pick up right after season 7. I don't know if you could do that now because so much time has passed, and if you want to have the same actors, you'd have to acknowledge that it's 20 years later or something. But if they had done season 8 back then, I would have loved for it to be something like that because I am just so interested in all the Bajor stuff. Isaiah Taylor, good news, Steve. All paid up till August with rent. Bills are paid, and I have food. I'm also visiting a friend in San Diego in late June to get further advice about me joining the Air Force. I also still have my job and am still receiving a paycheck. Yay! However, seeing the anti-governmental protests around the country and the murder of Ahmaud Arbery in Georgia has got me concerned as a black man in America. I'm also seeing a rise in idiot conspiracy theories from this COVID-19 crisis and other things, and I'm starting to see troubling signs. If you are a Marxist thinker interested in proletariat studies, i.e., studying the political philosophies of the working class versus the upper class, consult some random geek for more info. You, the Marxist, would believe that the right-wing anti-governmental protest is indeed a workers' struggle, albeit misguided, as well as the 1999 World Trade Organization protests in Seattle, aka the Battle of Seattle, that protested globalization and big corporations. This protest is obviously a left-wing protest, 90s duh. While I'm not a Marxist, I can definitely see the meager yet massively deep divide between the two. Right and left-wing proponents usually hate each other over the plight of the working class. Why? Getting back to the above topic, I feel like a great conflagration is coming. Say Trump loses and his most rancid supporters, ones who brag about their AR-15 and 357 Magnums, will take to the streets and cause trouble. I'm seriously thinking about buying a gun and cheaper option pepper spray. I voiced this fear because back in December 2019, I got in a heated debate about whether or not we should, wait for it, kill sex offenders. I took the side of no, and I got death threats on my page. I argued this with a former female classmate that I went to school at, so these people may be close by. I was worried about people with guns coming to kill me. It was a bunch of Trump rednecks. I'm beginning to raise my voice, and I understand the risks that are involved and understand the dire consequences of acting out as a black male, but I think it's worth it. November 3rd is fast approaching, and it's not looking good for Trump. Before this, there has been a peaceful transition of power. This might be different, and me and others need to be vigilant and be ready to deal with any problem that may arise. We need to have a plan. While I don't think this will come to pass, there is always that small chance. Well, that's where you and I definitely agree. I don't think that will come to pass either, and maybe that's wishful thinking on my part. I fully acknowledge that. Maybe it's naivete on my part. I fully acknowledge that. But How's that? Is it back now? It's back now. Okay. Yeah, I don't know what the hell was that. It's a good thing I was glancing at the it's a good thing I was glancing at the live chat when that happened. Yeah, I guess what I had to unplug my microphone and plug it back in, and that seemed to fix it. All right, thanks everybody. Sorry about that. Thank you for your patience. Guys, if it's not one thing, it's another. Okay, so anyway, the I was saying about Isaiah's question. You know, it's just if you as a black person in America feel like you need to buy a gun in order to be safe, like that to me is a very different kind of experience than if I, as a white person, felt the need to do that. You know what I mean? So like I would feel really sheepish as a white person, as a very privileged white person, saying to you as a black person, "Oh no, don't buy a gun, you'll be fine," because I just don't. You know, you may not be, or at least there is a unfortunately there's a greater chance that you won't be than there is for me. You know, so I can't say don't buy a gun. Oh, don't buy a gun, because you may feel like you have to buy one. I would love it if we were in a position in a society where if there weren't so many guns just widely available in the countries, if people weren't as heavily armed as they are, that people like you wouldn't feel the need to buy a gun to protect yourself. I would love it if we could just, like I've said before, if I could just wave a magic wand and poof all the guns away. I would do that in a heartbeat. But I can't do that, and there are quite a few Americans who do not want to part with their guns, even if it is for the greater good, for the public good. So, you may feel like that's what you have to do to be safe. And all I can tell you, all I can say is please be careful and please be safe. And I know it's not entirely up to you, unfortunately, but that's all I can really tell you, Isaiah, is please be safe. Next question is from Riley Dosh. Hey, Steve, not so much of a question as a comment, but have you checked your video translations lately, particular your one on Worf? Asking for a friend. I have not. And you know what? After I read your question earlier today, I meant to go check, and I just have not checked yet. So I apologize. I haven't checked, but I will go check and get back to you on that. So thank you for bringing it to my attention. Next question is from Danny K. Hi, Steve. First, congratulations on hitting 100K subscribers. I'm looking forward to your first Let's Play. Not really, just a little joke. Thought I'd still give it a shot if you did, though I'd still give it a shot if you did one. Even though I'm a patron, I'm a relative newcomer to the Steve and Stuffy series, and having gone back and watched some random older episodes, I find myself wondering how these two found each other. If there is an origin story already in the series, I'll have to go look for it, but if not, I'd be interested in hearing one. Thank you, and be well. There's never been an origin story in the show. There was a bit we did at the end of I can't remember what season it was. Maybe season 5 or season 6. It might have been season 6. It's the season where it ends with Stuffy moving away. We did a season where at the end of the season, Stuffy moves away to go live with Wilhelmina in Norfolk, Virginia. And the last episode is me and Stuffy saying goodbye. And in that scene, we talk a little bit about how we met. And it's implied that we met each other in an antique store when I was a child, which is a version of how Stuffy and I met in real life, because Stuffy, the stuffed animal, is a stuffed animal that I bought when I was a little kid, and I found him at an antique store. So that it's a version of that, but it's never actually been shown in the show. But it's something like that. And we've known each other for a very, very long time. Steve and Stuffy in the show have been friends and have known each other for a very, very long time. Since Steve, was a kid. So they're lifelong friends. That Brit nerd. Hi, Steve. New patron here. Loving your work. The Late Seating podcast has been getting me through working from home, so thank you. Sorry if this has been asked before. What's your favorite thing to film or you get the most enjoyment from doing? Congratulations on your silver plaque. P.S. I think Man of Steel is marginally better than SR. So sorry. Okay. Okay. All right. All right. I know that the sound went out earlier by accident. This time I'm going to mute my microphone just for a second. I'll turn it back right back on. I promise. Just okay. I'm better. Okay. I just had to get that off my chest, and I didn't want to say anything that might hurt that Brit nerd's feelings because I do genuinely appreciate the question, and like I said on that late seating podcast, it doesn't make you a bad person if you like Man of Steel, it just doesn't make you a bad person. I mean, it does to me, but it doesn't really. So it's okay. As for what's the most fun to film? Steve and Stuffy are my favorites. Steve and Stuffy are my favorites to do for sure. Yeah, those are my favorites. So, let me see. And that was the question, right? Yeah, what's your favorite thing to film or the most? Yeah, Steve and Stuffy's they're the ones that I like the most as finished products, and they're the ones that are the most fun to do. Sure, absolutely. Andrew C. Hawkins. Something reminded me of a Vox video featuring Ezra Klein recently. I don't remember the exact topic of the video, but I remember him saying that things like pushing for Puerto Rico's statehood and packing the Supreme Court would be wrong for Democrats to do because they would be power grabs. As much as I respect Ezra Klein, I think this highlights why the American left loses. We're afraid of power. When I asked you about the Supreme Court before, you mentioned impeaching right-wing judges. I think that's worth pursuing, and I also think that packing the court is worth pursuing. Politics is dirty. We're going to have to give some people some bloody noses, figuratively speaking, if we're to get anywhere. Are there any other specific power plays you think we should take? Power plays. Let me think. I mean, I'm probably an example of the problem that you're talking about because I can't think of any because I don't usually think in those terms. I don't think I mean, I think increasing voter turnout would help us. I think repealing voter ID laws and various forms of voter suppression would help us. But I support those because I just think that's the right thing to do. I think those measures that make it more difficult for people to vote are unethical and immoral and anti-democratic, and I want to get rid of them for that reason. I do think it would also benefit us. I do think Democrats and more progressive candidates would win more elections that way. That would be a result of it, but that's not. I don't see that as a power grab. You know what I mean? I don't see that as that's the reason to do it. But I take your point. If we don't win elections, then we don't get anything done. And the right wing is absolutely fucking ruthless. And that's one of the reasons why they are able to hold on to so much power despite representing an ever diminishing portion of the actual population of the country. That's why Trump can be so incredibly unpopular in nationwide opinion polls, but still solidly hold on to power because the right wing is just a lot more jealous of the power that they have and a lot more willing to bend or break the rules to protect that power and to expand it. And yeah, the left, you know, we would have a lot easier of a time getting our agenda through if we were a little more ruthless. So I agree with you as far as that goes. But as far as like other power grabs, like I can't think of any off the top of my head, and that's because I guess I am part of the problem. I'm one of those I'm one of those idealists that can't think in those that doesn't naturally think in those terms in this particular instance. So I can't think of anything. Kevin B. Hey, Steve. New patron. Just discovered your Star Trek videos. Love them. Could listen to you talk about Star Trek for hours. Oh, thank you, Kevin. Was just wondering, you mentioned in a couple of your videos how the Federation seems to have lost its way as predicted in the Picard series. Do you think that will be explored a bit more or at all in coming seasons, or will they just have Picard and crew take off for parts unknown, seeking adventure / injustice, never to address that again? You know, with this current crop of Trek shows and the creators behind it, it's really hard to tell. I could see it going either way. I could see a season 2 of Picard that remains very much entrenched in the world established in season 1 and is very concerned with the fallout from season 1 and the Federation and Starfleet sort of having to reclaim its ideals after falling short. But I could also see it going completely the opposite direction and them saying, okay, let's have some fun and let's just, send the crew of La Sirena out into the galaxy and have them get caught up in an adventure. It could go either way. I think it seems like, and who knows, but it seems like there may be some grappling with issues of like Starfleet's identity or Starfleet's importance, what Starfleet represents in terms of heroism and nobility and the better parts of all of us, like that sort of the Captain Pike version of Starfleet. It seems like that might be something to do with season 3 of Discovery, not necessarily with the next season of Picard, but Discovery season 3, just judging by what we've seen from the trailers and trying to extrapolate from that the best we can. It seems like that will be a part of Discovery season 3. The crew of the Discovery sort of finding themselves in the position of carrying the torch for the values that Starfleet and the Federation represent into this far future. So we'll see. But as for Picard, I honestly don't know. It could go either way. Next question is from Eric Allen. All right, Steve, simple question. What's your favorite non-Star Trek TV series that starred a Star Trek cast member? Examples include T.J. Hooker, Reading Rainbow, Blunt Talk, Beyond Belief, Fact or Fiction, etc. For my money, it's Reading Rainbow. The nostalgia, and as a kid, I learned quite a bit on various topics, and it helped ingrain me with curiosity about the world and an appreciation for reading. I guess you could say it did its job so well that I grew up to become a teacher of physics and English literature. Be well and stay safe, my friend. Well, thank you very much for the question. And that's quite a double specialty there. You're a physics teacher and an English lit teacher. I like that. I like that a lot. That's very Star Trek because you're melding like the hard sciences with the humanities. And that is something that we see characters in Star Trek do and Star Trek itself tries to do. So that's very Star Trek. That's really cool. A physics and an English lit teacher. I'm not looking at the live chat right now, but I bet somebody is going to mention Gargoyles. Gargoyles was a really, really terrific show, and it had like so many Star Trek The Next Gen alumni as voice cast, either as regulars or as guests. So Gargoyles needs to be mentioned if we're talking about shows featuring Star Trek alumni. I love Beyond Belief. I love Jonathan Frakes. Also have to throw in the original In Search Of, hosted by this guy right here. So that's also a possibility. But, I would probably say Reading Rainbow as well, and for similar reasons. I was never like, I liked Sesame Street, but I never watched Sesame Street regularly as a kid. Reading Rainbow, I never missed, and Mr. Rogers, I never missed. I watched those every day as a child for years and years and years. I would catch Sesame Street if it was on, and I liked Sesame Street. But Reading Rainbow and Mr. Rogers were the ones that I absolutely had to watch and could not miss no matter what. So I have to say probably Reading Rainbow. of the shows with Star Trek people in them for sure. Steven Sutton, are you aware of the comic strip series Chief O'Brien at Work? There is something pleasingly ridiculous about a Trek actually based on it. Hope you're well. Yes, I am familiar with Chief O'Brien at Work. I think it's hilarious. I think it is the last one where he goes out into space. I love Chief O'Brien at Work. And yeah, I do want to do a Trek Actually video, either a proper scripted one or a more improvisational, extemporaneous one, the not actually Trek Actually, about Star Trek comics at some point. And I would like to mention Chief O'Brien at Work as a part of that, because it is really funny, and it does sort of, it takes as its jumping off point a part of real Star Trek lore, that is part of the show that is really funny. Like the idea that Chief O'Brien, when he's on the Enterprise, is just in the transporter room all the time, and there can't be that much to do during the course of a day. So he's just kind of there by himself doing nothing. Like that idea is in the show, and it's really, really funny. And the comic takes advantage of that. So I know the comic, and I would definitely like to mention it in a Trek Actually video at some point. I don't think I could get an entire video out of it, but I would at least like to make mention of it because it is really good. John Brockman, who do you think will win in November, the racist rapist or the other racist rapist? Also, can you bring Joffrey back and have him or one of his neo-Nazi friends call Stuffy Cuckleberry Hound? I have to bring him back now just for that. I did recently decide, actually. I wasn't sure, and I know I've talked about this in these streams before. I wasn't sure when I would bring Joff back to Stephen Stuffy, and I wasn't sure if he would come back this year at all. I do think I am going to bring him back. He will make at least an appearance in 1 or 2 episodes in the fall when the show comes back. I figured out a way to work him in to the storyline that I already have planned for the fall, and I think he will fit in really nicely, and it will be a great sort of way of calling back to previous appearances by Joff. So he will come back, and I will try my damnedest to have him call Stuffy Cuckleberry Hound. And yeah, I do. My money is definitely on the racist rapist to win in November. So God bless America. Glenn Hellwig. Hey, Steve, love all the Trek videos that you do. My first question as a Patreon. I have a theory about why some people love Discovery and some aren't that thrilled with it. I believe it has to do with what generation they are from. I started watching Trek when it first aired in 1966. I was 7 at the time, so I'm old school. I don't dislike Discovery, but I wasn't overly excited by it either. My reason is that for me, Discovery has technology in it that TOS didn't have. Since it's a prequel, they shouldn't have that technology. I don't know why it bothers me, but it does. So what I'm saying is newer generations of Star Trek fans are more accepting than us old school Star Trek fans. I'm interested in knowing your opinion of my theory. By the way, DS9 is my favorite Star Trek series, like it is yours. Thank you, Glenn, for becoming a patron, and I'm glad to know that you're a fellow Deep Space Nine fan. Yeah, I think you're probably right. I think you're onto something there. I do think if you, even if you haven't been watching it since it was originally on, even if you're not someone who came into the show in the 60s, if you have been watching Star Trek for most of your life and you are of a certain age and you have that image of what the world looked like during classic Trek era, crystallized in your mind, and you see it as the way it looks in classic Trek, it may be difficult for some people to make the adjustment and to now accept the retconned visuals of Discovery and say, well, actually, it looks like that. It's not a problem for me because as I've discussed in other videos, and I don't know if with me, I don't think it's necessarily an age thing. I think it's just I'm very, very used to other things doing that. Like I used in a video I made a little while ago, I think last year I mentioned as an example the different actors playing Batman in the Tim Burton, Joel Schumacher Batman movies, and how not just the actors, but the aesthetics and the tones of those movies changed radically from Burton's original Batman to Schumacher's Batman and Robin, even though they all exist in the same universe. They all take place in the same continuity. That the George Clooney Batman in Batman and Robin and Michael Keaton's Batman from the '89 Batman are supposed to be the exact same person, but they are radically different. So that's kind of a retcon. Like there's no explanation for why everything is looks and sounds and feels so different. It just does because it's a fictional world, and the director and the writers decided they wanted to do something different, and they didn't do like a reboot and say, okay, this takes place in a different timeline. They just said, we're just going to make it different, and it's just going to be different because it's all made up anyway. And they did something similar with the level of technology and the design and the aesthetic of Discovery. They said, okay, it takes place roughly in the TOS era in about 10 years or so, give or take, before the first season of Classic Trek. And yeah, the technology and the design is not going to match at all. It's going to be inspired by TOS design, and there's going to be little Easter eggs and little, bits of inspiration. So you can tell that they were basing it on TOS designs, but it's going to be totally different. It's not going to look like that. And it's just going to be that way. There's no explanation. It's not time travel. It's not, it's different because of this or that. It's just different. And as far as the characters in the show, that's the way it's always been. And it just is that way. Star Trek had never really done something like that to that degree before. So I understand why certain old school fans might have resisted it. I understand why you might have had the reaction that you had and thought, that doesn't really work for me. I don't care. It doesn't bother me at all because that's just something that TV shows and movies do. Sometimes they just change things without explanation, and they can do it because it's all made up. And as long as the story is good, as long as I'm interested in what's happening, I don't care. But I understand why you might have that reaction. And it's not my job to tell you that your reaction is wrong. Because if that's the way you honestly feel, then that's the way you feel. And I know, so I think that's a very long-winded way of saying that I think you have a very valid theory there. So thank you for the question. Tom McDonald says, I know there are more pressing things in the world right now, but I can't get this one question out of my mind. What model of Swiss Army knife do you have, and how long have you had it? I have never been without one since I got my first one mumble years before you were born, and I used one to saw through a small tree that fell across a road I needed to drive on. Swiss Army knives are life. I used to know the name of the model, and I can't remember. And I've had it for so long. I've had it since I was in my early 20s, and it's the same knife. I've thought about getting a new one here and there, but I've never actually got one. So this is the same Swiss Army knife I've had since I was probably about 20 years old. And you can see the logo has even fallen off. The Victorionics logo used to be right there, and it fell off years and years ago. But this is my old ass Swiss Army knife. I've sharpened it a few times. I've oiled it a few times. It still works more or less. It does what I need it to do. But I've considered getting a new one a few times. So I don't know what model it is. It's a big one. It's not the biggest one, but it's not the MacGyver one either. MacGyver had the one where it's like the two blades and the screwdriver and the corkscrew, and that's it. This is like one size up from that. So I could look it up and tell you exactly what it is. And as a Swiss Army knife nerd, you would definitely know what it was. But maybe you can just tell from looking at it what model it is. It's that one. But yeah, it is always in my pocket. It's the one it has two knives. It has two screwdrivers, two flathead screwdrivers, plus on the back it has a Phillips head screwdriver, it has a can opener, it has pliers, it has scissors, it has a saw, it has a file, has a leather punch, it has a hook thing that I've still never been able to figure out what it's supposed to be used for. So yeah, that's the Swiss Army knife I have, and I've had it for a super, super long time. Not as long as you've had yours, Tom, obviously, but for a very, very long time. So I would not want to leave home without it. Next question is from Jin Hai. Steve Shives. The story of the House of Moog belongs in a generational epic movie trilogy of trilogies. Trilogy 1, Moog and Duras' father and how they end up at Khitomer. Trilogy 2, Worf and Kurn growing up in their TNG DS9 storylines, a retelling with 20-year-old actors. What would make a good trilogy? 3. You got Worf, Alexander, and one of the Duras sisters was pregnant. Kurn's got to have had a kid at some point. I think the obvious story would have been against the backdrop of war and peace between Klingons and Romulans. But because the Romulans were decimated and broken up, it's not a compelling context anymore. What is the next step in Klingon history? And how could we satisfy the millions of Trek fans who want a just desserts ending for that piece of shit Worf who shamefully had his loyal brother's soul wiped away on an operating table, married the disgusting slug woman who helped him do it, then went ahead to achieve his own selfish glory. Doran Shives, 2024. I love how you describe Worf in like the least charitable way possible. You make him look like the biggest scumbag ever, and then you attach me to his presidential ticket. I gotta run for president with the guy who played him after you describe him as being this just awful piece of shit. Thank you very much. Remember when I said earlier that Star Trek Mirror Universe or Star Trek Section 31 don't grab my attention all by themselves? Star Trek Klingons is another one of those. When you pitch me, let's do a trilogy of trilogies. Let's do a 9-movie cycle about Worf's family, starting with his father, leading up, and then going up to his children. I confess, even though I love Worf, and if you said let's do a Worf movie, and you had like a really cool idea for a Worf movie, I would be all on board with that. But if you say let's do the Star Wars trilogy of trilogies about Worf's family, that does absolutely nothing for me. That does not pique my interest at all. I'm sorry. Now, that doesn't mean that they couldn't be good. And it doesn't mean that if I watch those movies, I wouldn't change my mind and think, oh shit, this is actually really good. But just the idea, the concept doesn't entice me. If you like the idea of let's do 3 trilogies about Worf's family, that, first of all, it seems like overkill. It seems like way too many movies. And second of all, just the idea just doesn't grab me. But that doesn't matter. What matters is if it's a good story. I mean, I would totally see the movies. Like if the movies existed, I would totally go to see them, and maybe they'd be good. Hopefully they would be. Maybe just that idea doesn't grab me all by itself. Matthew Zeidman. Hi, Steve. I have a question regarding Star Trek Picard. Minor spoiler ahead for anyone not caught up. Also, apologies if you've already answered this one. Did you buy that Sutra was able to conduct a mind meld? Isn't that ability dependent, at least partially, on Vulcan biology? I guess Sutra could have programmed her body to mimic the functions of a Vulcan one. But does that mean she could also master the abilities of other telepathic members of the franchise, like the Betazoids or the Telosians, just by adding a few new subroutines? Yeah. Why not? Sure. I mean, Star Trek is a very, am I out of sync or am I not? Sorry, I just glanced at the chat again and somebody said I'm out of sync and somebody said I'm not. So let me know if I am. But yeah, Star Trek is a very scientific or franchise, or at least it has pretensions to science. The things that happen in Star Trek are almost always said to have scientific explanations. So if there is such a thing as telepathy, then there must be a scientific explanation for that. There must be something physically that is happening that Betazoids, for example, are able to pick up to read people's minds or read people's emotions. And with a Vulcan, the touch telepathy of the mind meld, there's something physical going on. So if a biological entity can figure that out and do that, then why couldn't an android? If an android could analyze what was going on and think, oh, how do Betazoids read minds? How could I mimic that? Why couldn't they do that? If Sutra figured out physiologically what's happening during a Vulcan mind meld, and she says, oh, how could I figure out how to do that myself? Why couldn't she do that? So no, that doesn't bother me at all. That doesn't bother me at all. That Sutra taught herself how to do the Vulcan mind. It makes no difference to me at all. Because presumably in the world of Star Trek, everything has a scientific explanation. So it's not as though the Vulcans are doing anything magic. You know, they're just doing something that they have a physical ability to do. And if an android can mimic that ability somehow, why wouldn't an android be able to do that? Next question from John Gingras. Hi, Steve. It's been a rough week, and I've been struggling to come up with a question for this Ask Away, so I'll default to something I've been pondering. When I first discovered your channel, I completely skipped Steve and Stuffy because I saw stuffed animals and thought, well, that looks weird. However, I ended up catching an episode when one queued up after a Trek Actually video, and I loved it. So my question is, why is Steve and Stuffy so damn good? Oh boy, your check is in the mail. I feel like I should refund your patronage now, John. Thank you for saying that. And thank you for saying that you think that about Steve and Stuffy. That's really gratifying because, as I said before, Steve and Stuffy are my favorite videos that I do. I love the Steve and Stuffy video, so it's really, it really makes me happy that you decided to watch one after a long time and it turned out to be something you really liked. I think Steve and Stuffy is good. And keep in mind that self-praise is cheap praise. And also keep in mind that an artist's view of their own work may not necessarily be the best view to take or the only legitimate view or whatever. But for me personally, I like the fact that the major characters in Steve and Stuffy over the years have become fully developed people. With recognizable personalities. They're not just stuffed animals with funny voices. Stuffy is a person with a personality, and he is different from Steve, and he is different from Toby Benson, and he is different from Jack. And Millicent is different from Stuffy and different from the other. They all have their individuals. They've been developed as characters, and they have changed a bit. They haven't been static characters. You know, they've grown and changed, and they've been forced to make choices, and the directions of their lives have altered as a result of those choices in some, you know, relatively meaningless, superficial ways, and in some very important ways. And that's what I like about them. I like the fact that there are certain jokes that I could only write for Toby Benson. There are certain lines that I can write that will only be funny if Jack McPherson says them, or will only be funny if Stuffy says them. Stuffy has a line in the episode that just went up today where he makes a really cutting remark about conservatism, where, you know, Beauregard says, Beauregard says, think about things from my point of view. And Stuffy says, the point of view of someone who doesn't care about suffering and feels no responsibility to alleviate it. And Beauregard says, from the perspective of a conservative. And Stuffy comes right back and says, well, that's what I just said. But he says it in sort of an offhand kind of, you know, like he's not trying to hurt Beauregard's feelings. He just kind of slips it in under his breath a little bit. And there's no other character I can imagine saying that line in that way than Stuffy, because Stuffy is an individual and he has his own sense of humor and his own personality. And so do all of the rest of them. So that's why I think that's why it works for me. That's why I have so much fun writing it and performing it. And also my character, when I play myself on screen, I get to be a complete buffoon. I get to play like the worst case scenario, not worst case scenario, but a significantly diminished version of myself compared to the real me. Hopefully the real me is a smarter, better person than me and Steve and Stuffy usually is. And that is so much fun. It's so much fun to do. So I think and hopefully that fun comes across to the viewer as well. And I think that helps with the appeal too. So thank you very much for saying that. And thank you for giving me an excuse to pontificate and blather on about my own fucking shit for a few minutes. The Loneliest Monk. Hey, Steve, hope all is well. Sometimes I find scenes in Star Trek to get to me emotionally, maybe to the point where I might feel a tear trying to get into my eye. For instance, I find the scene where Nog explains to Captain Sisko why he wants to join Starfleet to be emotionally moving, as well as the scene where Worf has to choose between accomplishing the mission or going back to save Jadzia. Are there any scenes in Star Trek that give you the feels in that way? Oh, God, yes. I'll give you two of the really big ones. First, the ending of Deep Space Nine's The Visitor, when Sisko avoids the energy discharge and closes the loop and avoids being trapped in subspace. And Jake, not knowing anything that has happened, says, "Are you okay?" And he embraces Jake, pulls him just so close, and like, they're touching heads, like he's rubbing his head against him, like some kind of a papa bear cub or something. And he says, "I am now, Jake. I am now." That wrecks me every time. That's such a beautiful scene. And also, the death of Captain Kirk's father in the first J.J. Abrams Star Trek. There's the music of that is so beautiful. The score there by Michael Giacchino is just gorgeous and so sad. And that whole scene is just beautiful to me because he's on the ship all by himself, and he's fighting off Nero's ship so that the people who have evacuated from the Kelvin can get away. And boy, they really lay it on thick and pull on the heartstrings, because it's like he hears his child being born over the comm line, and it's like I know that it's cheap and it's manipulative, but god damn it, it works on me. I have to admit that it works on me, and it gets me every time. And that scene gets to me too. So those are the two big ones. There are more than that if I really think about it, but those are the two that jump to my mind when you say what are some scenes from Star Trek that really, really get to you and really move you. Joe McClory. While I agree that Trump is a symptom of the movement towards white male aggrievement in the Republican Party, there is a wound he causes that I don't hear spoken of much. I know a lot of not particularly political conservative voters that are becoming generally worse people as they feel forced to defend their support of Trump and both the dumb things he does and the harm he causes. People that worked in a non-profit human services and seldom have anything negative to say about anyone were suddenly talking about how some people are thugs, and even saying, "I hope you get raped when you let all those illegals in response to saying we should treat people in the migrant caravan as people and not an invading army. I don't think that people are good or bad, and I don't think Trump makes people bad, but I have seen kind people become at least outwardly less empathetic or empathetic to a smaller and smaller group. I'm so torn how to deal with people like this, old friends and family that are spreading misinformation and hate. I often write and delete comments to misinformation, and when I report their posts as fake news, I have to stare at unfollow or unfriended, trying to decide if it is better for me and them to yell facts at them, to ignore them, or just cut ties. With all the posts about plandemic and how wearing masks does more harm than good, I have been thinking about this a lot. I will not ask you to choose for me or what you would decide to do, but do you have any advice for how best to call someone out on their shit without hurting them more than needed? Some reassurance that it is not my job to bring them back and help them be more caring, and some encouragement to have the courage to cut ties with people who even ignoring their behavior is doing harm to me mentally. Well, the most important thing that I can tell you in that situation is that you do have the right to cut ties with people like that, if that is what is best for you. Like, you don't have to justify it to them or to yourself. You don't owe them an explanation. You don't have to come up with any better reason than this is causing me harm. This is causing me emotional and mental distress to have to deal with this, and I would be better off if I didn't have to deal with it. If you have the option to turn away from those people, you can do that. You have the power to do that, and you don't owe an explanation to anybody. Not to them, not even to yourself if you don't feel like. You have the option to do that. And if you need me to tell you that you have that option, I'm telling you you have that option. You can do that. You can just turn away from people if they are causing you harm, if they are causing you distress. If it is making your life worse to be around those people, you do not have to be around them. And the other thing is, it's not your job to bring them back. You're not the one who pushed them over to wherever they are, and it's not your job to bring them back. And I completely sympathize with the disillusionment and the sadness that comes through in your question, where you see people who you're like, oh, I thought they were good people. Maybe it's someone you've known for a long time. Maybe it's someone you worked with, or a friend of the family, or someone you went to school with, or someone you've been friends with. And you think, oh, I thought they always struck me as a kind-hearted, compassionate person. And now listen to them. Look at the kind of thing they're supporting. Look at the kind of thing that they're willing to turn a blind eye to. Like, I completely get that. I completely sympathize with that. But it's not your fault. And it's not up to you to try and pull them back in. Like, you can just leave it. You can just walk away. It's okay. It's okay to do what is best for you and to not feel pressure or responsibility to try and save people. As for if you do decide to try and talk to people, try as best you can to put it in human terms. And this may be futile, you may not be able to do this, but try to get them to see people as people. Like the COVID thing, it's not just numbers, it's not just people trying to make Trump look bad or trying to manipulate people through fear or whatever these conspiracy theorists and these Trump people think is happening. We're talking about real people. Like, real people are dying of this disease. Real people are getting sick and having their livelihoods threatened by this disease. Real people are living in fear because of this disease. This is not an abstract thing. This is really happening. And if we don't do this right, if we rush back into things too quickly, if we don't take social distancing and self-quarantining and all of these other measures designed to slow this pandemic seriously, and we don't act vigilantly and responsibly, a lot more people could die than are already going to. And those, again, are real people who are going to die. Those are real lives that are going to be lost as a result of this, who could have been spared if only we had acted differently. So try to put it in human terms. And I don't know if that'll work, but to me, that's probably your best bet. Next question is from Sean Hartley. If you could try any Star Trek food or drink, what would it be? Oh man. That chocolate sundae that Counselor Troy eats in that one episode of TNG looks pretty goddamn good. I like to grab a spoon and dig into one of those. Jumja sticks, just to see what the hell that is. A Jumja stick, maybe. I don't know about Kanar. I would say maybe I'll try like a sip of Kanar, but Kanar, it seems like it will be like drinking like syrup. It looks very thick, and I don't know if I would like that. But yeah, maybe a Jumja stick, maybe some Klingon food. I admit I would be willing to try some Klingon food. I don't think I would want to try Gok. I don't think I'd want to try anything that was still alive. But some of the stuff that's been cooked, that's not still alive, I might be willing to try some Klingon food. Sure. Yeah, those are some options. And last question from my fellow Marylander, Matthew Datcher. Now that Governor Hogan has changed stay at home to safer at home, what are you going to do with your newfound freedom? Sit in your office and chat with us, it looks like at the moment. Should the trees be warned? I hope you and your family are staying safe. Well, that's the thing, is that the stay-at-home order still allowed us to go out and get exercise and do recreation. And since the Antietam battlefield right near my house has been open this whole time, and I have even when it's been busy, I've been able to go and keep my distance from people. So, I've been climbing trees about as often as I've wanted to and had time to anyway. So really, again, I feel bad. I feel like my actual day-to-day life has been affected less by this than most people's. I haven't had to deal with a loss of income because thankfully my Patreon and YouTube income has not gone down. In fact, it's actually gone up this past month, which, is awesome. But I feel a little guilty when I see people like worrying about how they're going to pay their bills. And I'm like, oh, I'm making more money. Not complaining, just working through a little bit of some complicated feelings about it, given the current state of the world. So that hasn't affected me other than wearing a mask to go to the grocery store. That's really the only thing that has really, really, really changed. So, I probably won't do anything that I haven't done before because, restaurants are still closed, and most of the places that are going to be allowed to open at limited capacity starting next week, or starting today, actually, I think is when the new order went into effect, are places I really didn't go to all that often anyway. So my life probably won't change all that much under the safer at home order than it would under the stay at home order. And we still have to wear masks when we go out in public, and we still have to do social distancing. So it's not like the state has reopened. It's just a slightly less, we're slightly less closed than we were. which I think is smart. I think if we are going to reopen, I would prefer we just keep things the way they were for a while until if things improve more than they have. But if people do insist on trying to go back to normal, it should be in a very, very slow, gradual, staged process. So this current stage is not all that different from where we have been the last couple of months. So, I'm not, my life isn't any different than it has been. So yeah, there you go. That's something else for me to have complicated feelings about. So, let's go to the live chat. That was the last patron question. Let's see what everybody is doing in the live chat. Hi, everybody. Oh, I missed a super chat earlier from Scott, a.k.a. Civic, who says, Steve, huge fan, and I'm glad I can finally catch one of these live. Lighter topic, how did you feel about the Picard with Data's send-off? Found it riveting. Yeah, I think I said in my review video, I had problems with the Picard data scene just because it felt like we had already been there. It felt like we had already said goodbye to Data in Nemesis. And now it's like we get to the end of this series and it's like, guess what the ending is? We're saying goodbye to Data again. But that actual scene was beautiful. That final scene of Picard and Data when they're in the quantum simulation is a beautiful scene. Beautifully written, beautifully acted. I thought it was a wonderful, wonderful scene. So I agree with you that it was riveting and that it was a great scene. It just felt like a little bit of a double beat. It felt like, haven't we been here already? But then other people have pointed out that it's different because it does give Picard a kind of closure that he didn't have before. And that lack of closure was something that we saw him deal with during the Picard series, like the fact that he missed Data and felt like there was unfinished business between him and Data, or that he never told Data how he felt about him, was something that weighed on Picard. So Picard got to get that off his chest at the end. So that I see that point, and that it's a really, really great scene. Great scene. So thank you for the super chat. And I just saw another super chat come in from John Burns. Is your mask see-through? Don't you care about the deaf? Or are you, as some random geek keeps talking about, one of those liberals? My mask is not see-through, so if a deaf person if I did want to communicate with me and we were unable to work it so they could read my lips, I guess I would just have to write stuff down. That's the only thing I can figure. That's the only thing I could figure out that I could work. But no, my mask is not see-through. So I apologize if there to any deaf people I encounter out in the wild when I have the mask on. If anybody is unable to read my lips, I apologize. Let me know, and I'll just type something out on my phone, and we can communicate that way. Let's see what's going on in the live chat now, aside from the super chats. Deralta Trekkie says, do you think that Discovery would now turn into something like Gene Roddenberry's Andromeda? I've seen people make that comparison. I can't really say because I never watched that show, so I don't know. But I've seen people make that comparison before. Eric Allen with another super chat, and thank you for that, and asking a question that I'm sure people have been talking about, which is Captain Pike series just announced. Thoughts? Yeah. I think it's fantastic. That's actually why Spock is my silent co-host this week. Because, of course, not only will Captain Pike be in the new show, but also Spock. Not Nimoy Spock, obviously. Ethan Peck Spock, but same character, different actor, different look, same character. The beauty of the retcon. So, yeah, I'm really excited about it. I thought Anson Mount's Captain Pike, the Discovery version of Captain Pike, was one of the best parts of Discovery Season 2. I thought Ethan Peck's Spock really grew on me by the end. And by the end of the season, I thought, man, I like this version of Spock. I thought he was really cool. Even though I liked Spock with a beard, I loved seeing clean-shaven Spock take his station on the Enterprise in the last episode of the season. I love that version of the Enterprise. As I have said over and over again, I've talked myself to till I was hoarse about how much I love the Discovery version of the Enterprise, both exterior and the interior. I love that bridge set. So I am so excited that we are going to get a show where we get to spend time with those versions of those characters on that ship. I could not be happier. I'm really, really excited. The worst part is that we're closed down due to a pandemic, and who knows when production will actually be able to start. But whenever that is, I am 100% there for it. I'm super excited about Strange New Worlds. Absolutely. Here's a question from 255 AD. How would you feel about having elected people who can be recalled, replaced at any time, or just overruled by a direct vote? That's my preferred setup, liquid democracy. I think that's a great idea. I think there should be recall statutes for pretty much any office you can think of. I'm totally in favor of there being a codified method for any elected official to be recalled, and have it set in stone what requirements have to be met, how many signatures do you need, what's the process of starting a recall election. I think having a recall mechanism for any elected official is a great idea. I'm totally in favor of that. They're all to Trekkie. Next to Chief O'Brien at work, what is your favorite Trek comic? I love the Mirror Universe comics out of the 90s, 80s. I've read a lot of the DC stuff set during the TOS movie era from the 80s and 90s, and I like a lot of that. Peter David wrote a lot of that, and I'm a big fan of Peter David's writing, especially in comics. So I like that. It's like the trial of Captain Kirk and who killed Captain Kirk and stuff. It was sort of set in between the movies, and there's some really cool stuff that I'm probably going to talk about if I ever do a Trek Actually video about the comics, because I do want to talk about how they handled in the comics the interval between Star Trek 3 and Star Trek 4, where they brought Spock back, and then they had to kind of make Spock back into how he was at the end of Star Trek 3 to tie in with Star Trek 4 so that it would all make sense. They had to kind of get creative, and they gave Kirk command of the Excelsior at one point because the Enterprise had been destroyed, and then they had to figure out a way to write their way out of that to get them all back on Vulcan so that it would match with Star Trek 4. They were very creative with that, and I like those comics. They also there was a series, I think it might have been Malibu or Marvel. I can't remember what the publisher was because the Star Trek comic license has passed through so many hands over the years. But they actually did a Captain Pike series called Star Trek Early Voyages that was about the Enterprise under the command of Christopher Pike. And I thought that was really good too. It only ran for about a year and a half. But I thought that was really good too. So there you go. Just saw a super chat from John Burns, thank you again. You're in support of an elected state, not some kind of dictatorial state like Lenin in Russia in 1920, right, Steve? Because the unelected dictatorial state of Russia ended up being led by... Oh, yeah, absolutely. I believe in a democratic government. I don't believe in a dictatorial... I don't believe in oligarchs or monarchs or autocrats or anything like that. I believe in a rule of law subject to and accountable to the will of the people and democratic elections. Absolutely. And 255 AD says, Mia was streaming on Twitch when I saw you posted a Q&A thread, so I asked her what to ask you. That's how that happened. Well, good to know. I hope that word gets back to Mia about what I had for dinner and that she finds it acceptable. Scott, a.k.a. Civic, with another super chat. Star Trek animated series is underrated. Also think we will see Q in season 2 of Picard. I agree that TAS is underrated, absolutely, and I would love to see Q in Picard. John Delancey has joked about that. Well, he doesn't think it'll happen because Q is supposed to be ageless, and John Delancey is now obviously much older than he was the last time he played Q. But there are such easy ways to write around that. You could just say, well, Q is appearing as older because he thinks it would make Picard feel better, or he thought it would be, I thought I would remind you of your own mortality, Jean-Luc, or something like that. You know what I mean? There's ways you can just come up with a line of dialogue to explain why he's older. And we all know the real reason is because John Delancey is older. I would love to see Q in season 2. I would love to see Q come back. Absolutely. Deralta Trekkie, question. So you're a Swiss Army knife nerd? Was it because of MacGyver? 100%. 100% because of MacGyver. That's it. That is the only reason why I have a Swiss Army knife, because of MacGyver. You're absolutely, and I'm not. It sounds like I'm going overboard and being a smartass. That's 100% the reason. That's 100% the reason. Ray Villarosa, it was Marvel with the Pike series. Thank you. I didn't read it until years later. I actually read it. The Pike series was one of the series that they collected in omnibus editions when IDW got the comic license. And IDW still has the Star Trek comic license. They've had it for a long time now. And when they first got it, one of the cool things they did was put together omnibus collections of issues that had been published under the previous license holder. So they put out collections of the DC stuff and the Marvel stuff. So yeah, that's where I read the Pike series. And it was Marvel. Thank you for telling me. Marvel also did a pretty good Deep Space Nine series, I recall, when they got the license. It was one of the first things they did when Marvel got the license. They put out a Deep Space Nine monthly series. John Burns, another super chat, says, "You're the coolest person who's ever stolen an idea of mine. Let's make it official. My quantum leap Sam and Al leaping into Star Trek idea. I give you without expectation of credit or compensation." Thank you, and I am totally going to use that. I mean that. John is talking about the Star Trek photo comics that I do with action figures like Spock here, and Commander Riker and the other cast members that I have collected over the past few months. John suggested, hey, why don't you do an episode where Sam from Quantum Leap leaps into Riker and hilarity ensues. And I wrote that down in my list of story ideas literally within minutes of you posting that comment. So thank you for officially giving me permission to do that, because I am definitely going to do that. I know exactly how it's going to go, and hopefully it'll be really funny. And yeah, I'm very, very excited about doing that. So thank you for that idea, because that is a great idea. Kevin Logan is in the chat. Hello, Kevin. Deralta Trekkie says, question, ever heard of the conspiracies by Xavier Naidoo and Attila Hildmann? Both said Germany is a state under siege and other bullshit. No, I'm not familiar with that. I don't know if I've ever heard either of those names, to be honest. 255 AD says, do you not think the Bajarians' total lack of separation of church and state should keep them out of the Federation? That's a good question. That might be something that they could explore during the Never Happened Season 8 of Deep Space Nine that I kind of pitched earlier. If we're going to focus on Bajaran stuff, that might be a requirement for them to join the Federation that causes a lot of friction. I think that would be a really great, some great story potential there. Super chat from Sean Hartley. Thank you, Sean. Do you think it's a bit odd that 21st century Earth is referred to as ancient in TNG? We say ancient for thousands of years ago rather than hundreds. Yeah, it doesn't really work. I think they do that for the joke, but it doesn't really work. Yeah, you're right. We don't think of ancient as being in the 1900s or the 1800s or the 1700s. We don't think of that as being the ancient world. But in TNG, they refer to what we call the Old West as the Ancient West. It doesn't really work, but it's for a gag. So it'll do for a gag. My favorite joke of that kind is from Star Trek Beyond, when they hear one of the Beastie Boys, and they say, it sounds like classical music. I love that joke. I love that joke so much. Random Geek says, Nancy Pelosi won't add a $2,000 UBI to the bill unless Republicans will vote for it. Doesn't that mean Republicans will determine our progress? Well, unfortunately, as long as the Republicans control the Senate, they do have a say in our progress. I wish they didn't. I want the Democrats to take a majority in the Senate as well. So then you don't, if they're, I mean, Pelosi is right in the sense that if they want to pass the best relief package they can, and they believe a $2,000 payment per month is something that will kill the bill in the Senate, but they could pass a bill. They could pass a bill without that would still give a lot of relief and help to people that would pass the Senate. I can see her point of view on that. The problem is that the Republicans control the Senate. The problem is not that Nancy Pelosi is being pragmatic. The problem is that if they do pass a bill that has a $2,000 monthly payment, and then they send it to the Senate, knowing that the Republican majority in the Senate will not vote for that, then they've just passed a useless bill, and they want to get something done. It's an emergency situation, and if they're going to pass a bill to bring relief to people, they want it to be a bill that can pass the other house and actually become law. And it sucks that the other house is controlled by fucking Republicans who don't want to help anybody, but that's the situation for now. So I can't really blame Pelosi for that. I do wish that Pelosi was more progressive. I do wish Pelosi was a hell of a lot more friendly to the progressive wing of her own party, for sure. But if she said that she's not going to put $2,000 a month payment, to people as a form of UBI in the bill because the Republicans won't vote for it, she's just being practical. because Republicans in the Senate have to vote for it or it's not going to pass. And that sucks, but that's the reality. Queer Pro Black says, if DS9 was rebooted, what actors would you prefer? What about if Cisco was brought back for a special miniseries? Should we get a resolution on Cisco as the emissary? Oh, if we rebooted, what actors would I prefer? Oh man, who could possibly play Cisco? That's a great question. Who would be a good actor to play Cisco other than Avery Brooks? I'm completely blanking. I don't know who we could get to play Cisco. But would I like to see a resolution on Cisco as the emissary? Yeah, of course. If you're going to do a Deep Space Nine, if you're not going to do a reboot and you're going to do like a sort of a sequel series and try to bring as many of the original actors as the original versions of the characters back as you can. If you couldn't get Avery Brooks to come back and reprise the role of Cisco, then it almost wouldn't be worth doing. You know, because of course, I'd love to see Cisco come back from the wormhole and see what happens. Yeah, for sure. Francois Lecomte says, make the Republicans vote against it and own it. That's a legitimate. That's a legitimate point of view, but then you would have to pass another bill right after that anyway. So pass the bill that you know they're going to vote against to get them to vote against it, so you can say, "See, they voted against helping people." I get that. Then you're going to have to pass another bill that they will vote for anyway. You know, so I can kind of see where both people are coming from, but that is a legitimate point of view to say make them vote against it. I just got a super chat from. 1234 Tom H that says message retracted. So whatever that was about. Thank you for the super chat. Drought to Trekkie says Christopher Judge. That's interesting. Seal0626 says Chiwetel Ejiofor. That's also a good choice. I don't know. Maybe. I'm trying to picture them with their head shaved. Who would be a good Cisco? Because I would want like Hawk Cisco. I want to just start out with head shaved, goateed Cisco. Final Cisco. That's a good Idris. See, I thought Idris Elba, but he's a little old. I mean, if you're going to do a reboot, I'd want to start with maybe a slightly younger Cisco. Progressive Liberal says, I'm hoping they'll make Strange New Worlds more of a sci-fi horror thing like TOS was, and less action movie like DIS. Yeah, kind of like Twilight Zone in space, sort of. I could go for that. I don't know if that's what it's going to be, but I could totally go for that. Yeah. Michael B. Jordan is Cisco? I don't know. I don't know if Michael B. Jordan is right for Cisco. Same thing with Chadwick Boseman. He might. I mean, they're both fantastic actors. So I wouldn't say that they absolutely couldn't do it. But I don't know if I'm just casting by type. I don't know if I would go Chadwick Boseman or Michael B. Jordan. Jemshin said, "Oh, Winston Duke is Cisco. Now that's a good one." Some random geek said Winston Duke is Cisco. That's a really good one. That might be the one. I don't know. I can see Winston Duke as Cisco. That might be one. Oh, Winston Duke. There you go. Winston Duke is Cisco. Yeah, Michael B. Jordan could work for the reboot. If you're gonna go a different direction, or you're gonna do like a young Cisco, you're gonna start him out younger than we meet him in Deep Space Nine, the original series. Yeah, he could work. But if we're going for like a new version of Cisco who is roughly the same age and roughly the same kind of character that we see him in Deep Space Nine, I don't know if Michael B. Jordan is good for that. But Winston Duke is a really good one, I think. Okay, anyway, Jemshin says, kind of random, but how do you think the etymology of the word Trump will change in coming generations? Trump card, trumped up charges. I think it'll have an effect. I think it'll have an effect, for sure. Yeah. Queer pro-black, you don't think Winston Duke would be good? John Williams says Lawrence Fishburne. I mean, Lawrence Fishburne is fantastic, but I think he might be a little old if we're casting Cisco in a reboot. Not a fan of... Oh, J. August Richards. Now, I hadn't even thought of him. J. August Richards, he's getting kind of old too, though. He's been around for a while. He still looks the same age. He still looks the same age as he was in fucking Angel. But J. August Richards, maybe, possibly, yeah. He came. I mean, I wouldn't say no. If someone came to me and said, we want you to produce a reboot of Deep Space Nine and we have J. August Richards attached as Cisco, I would not say no. But I'm curious as to why Queer Pro Black doesn't like Winston Duke, because I think he would be really good, unless there's something I don't know. Progressive liberal says, I wonder if kids will want to play the trumpet anymore. I hope the instrument doesn't suffer. I hope the instrument doesn't suffer as a result of Trump being a shitty president. 255 AD says, will Stuffy try to challenge the mayor's attempt to privatize the police in court? If he does, it will not be on camera. Like, it will not be a major plot line in the show. I might mention it and say maybe it's something that Stuffy is pursuing, but it's kind of caught up in the courts and it will take a while for it to work itself out. But I do think that would be something that Stuffy would try, for sure. Yeah. I mean, Stuffy would try to fight it in the courts, but that won't be like a major part of the story. Mike Audette says, should Diana Muldaur have been brought back up to play Moriarty's holographic love interest in the TNG episode Ship in a Bottle? He said he hoped to see her again. That might have been interesting. He could make like his own Dr. Pulaski on the holodeck. Got another super chat from 123 Tom H. It says, didn't know I had to put a message in the first one. Well, you didn't have to, but it said message retracted, so I didn't know if you had put one in and then taken it out. So thank you for the super chat both times. And this one says, didn't know I had to put a message in the first one. Like the movie Win a Date with Tad Hamilton, could you do a video with you chopping wood or mowing the lawn with your shirt off and blue jeans? Stuffy makes remarks. I'm probably not going to do a wood chopping video, but thank you for saying you would be interested in seeing that. I'm flattered. There's nothing here to see. There's nothing here to see. But thank you for imagining that there must be. Super chat from John Burns. You ever get a chance to watch this video of the History Bites episode I posted? Google History Bites YouTube and check Thomas Beckett. Haven't watched it, but we'll get around to it at some point probably. Some Random Geek says, if Stuffy wasn't an elected official, I hope he would do direct action to challenge the mayor. I don't want to give anything away, but part of Stuffy, the story of Stephen Stuffy this year, when it comes back in September and really kicks into high gear, the story of Stephen Stuffy this season is a very Stuffy-centric story, and it will deal with both the advantages and the limitations of doing things the way Stuffy tries to do them. Stuffy, like me, would prefer to work within the system and would prefer to try and seek compromise with people. Stuffy's actually a little more apt to try and seek compromise with people than I am in real life. But that's because he's an idealist and he's a very compassionate person and he wants to see the good in people and he wants to help people. And he also has a pragmatic streak that says, well, let me try to help people in the best way I can in the situation that I'm in. And Stuffy will will have to confront the limitations of that. And will also have to deal with situations where he is pressured to act contrary to his ideals. And whether he chooses to do that or not will have a big effects on his life and on the lives of his friends. So that will be the story of Stephen Stuffy this year. And, if he were the type of person who might, turn more quickly to direct action instead of trying to work through the system, some of the stuff that's going to happen to him and happen to the others this year might not happen. But that'll be part of what the show is about this year. Yes, Gerald the Trekkie says, Professor Moriarty, played by Niles from The Nanny. Yes, exactly. Queer Pro Black says, meant for a DS9 movie rework like the recent, like a reboot, like a Kelvin version of DS9. Yeah, exactly. That's kind of what I was imagining that you were doing, that you were pitching as well. I'd be up for it. Dear Alta Trekkie says, do you think that I, a German fanfic writer, might have a shot at getting a potential Star Trek book series published? The whole IP thing ignored? I have no idea. Maybe. If your stuff is good enough and if you show it to the right person, who knows? Some random geek says, question, what if Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, and Joe Biden are not for a UBI or Medicare for all? Because how can we pay for it? How can we get progress done? You elect people who are in support of it to offices in the future. And then hopefully they will get it. Like Joe Biden, if Joe Biden wins the election, he's not going to be president for life. Nancy Pelosi is not going to be the Speaker of the House forever. There are more progressive Democrats in the party, in elected offices, in Congress even right now. Not as many as I would like. They're not as influential as I would like to see them be in the party. But hopefully, if we continue to support them and elect more of them, they will be eventually. So, I mean, yeah, you vote for more progressive people. And if Joe Biden won't do it or Nancy Pelosi and Schumer won't do it, then you elect people who will. You know, that's how women got the right to vote. People, there used to be people who did not support women's suffrage, and then enough people won elected office and were willing to vote for it, and it happened. You know, there never used to be a Civil Rights Act. People used to be completely opposed to it. There was no support for it at all. And then in the 60s, enough people were elected to office who were willing to vote for it, and they voted for it, and we got the Civil Rights Act. I mean, that's how that kind of political progress is made. Couple of super chats here. Here's one from Dr. Strange Jove. With 7 appearing to remain as crew in Picard Season 2, do you think there's a chance that the Omega Directive has a chance to come up? I don't know. Maybe. Possibly. I wouldn't expect it, although they have done some. Season 1 of Picard had quite a few Voyager references, so maybe. I don't know. I guess it would all depend on what the story is. And here's one from John Burns. Those suggestions are all great for who should play a young Cisco. Ever heard of a Caribbean-Canadian actor named Roger Cross? Check him out, surviving COVID in Dark Matter as number 6. Check him out while surviving COVID in Dark Matter as number 6. I will check him out. I don't know if I've ever heard of him before, but I will check him out. David Colby says, I'm very sleepy for some reason. All I did was stay up from 12 p.m. to 6 p.m. watching the entirety of She-Ra season, I think that means 12 a.m. 12 a.m. to 6 p.m. watching the entirety of She-Ra season 5. What do you think of my medical problem is? Is it COVID? Probably. It's probably COVID. You're probably going to die. Some random geek says, what about the violence behind the civil rights and women's voting right? You mean like do you mean like the direct action that motivated the legislators to vote for it, that showed them the need for it? Yeah, I mean, that I'm not saying that people taking to the streets and protesting has no place in our system. Obviously it does. But eventually, if your argument is, well, Joe Biden won't vote for it, okay, well then you need to elect people who will vote for it. And direct action and taking to the streets and protests and, occupying people's, offices and stuff like that can all help for sure. And it played a big role in the passage of the Civil Rights Act and the 19th Amendment, for sure. But that by itself won't be enough. You're going to have to elect people to do it. Duralta Trekkie says, what about David Harewood? I think he's the Martian Manhunter on Supergirl as Ben Sisko. Oh, he might be good too. Yeah, David Harewood. I can see that. He definitely has the voice. He has a nice, deep, commanding voice. Yeah, I maybe. 255 AD says, I like to call Carl Gon Fat Will Riker. Is that body shaming? It's mostly Riker shaming. I would feel bad about comparing the person you reference to Will Riker for any reason. I think Will Riker deserves more than that. All right, and I'm going to I'm gonna wrap this up pretty soon. So if anybody has final questions, in the next minute or so, post them in the live chat, and I'll try to answer final questions. And I'm going to get ready and wrap this up. We've been going almost 2 hours. Sean Hartley says, so we can all agree that most conservatives are pieces of shit, but do you think it's important to invite them into the conversation so they have the opportunity to hear about the important things? I think it's important to I don't think that conservatives should be completely shut out of everything just because they're conservatives. Sure. And there's always the opportunity that somebody might change their mind. But I don't think that going out of our way to pander to conservatives is productive. Facundo Borden says, I love your work. All the best from Argentina. Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Queer Pro Black says, I'm saying it first, like Marvel MCU and crossovers. This needs to happen with individual Star Treks. Trekverse. I'm all in favor of that. I think that's fantastic. That'd be a great idea. Deralta Trekkie says, but who would be Kira if Nana Visitor would not return? Maybe Terrell Rothery? I'm not familiar with them. I don't know. But yeah, we could do, I'd have to do some research and come up with like some fantasy castings for like a reboot Deep Space Nine, because I really haven't given it that much thought. Michael J. Ingram says, please do a video on Darmok. I would love to do a video on Darmok. If I can figure out like a thesis for a Star Trek, for a Trek Actually video that allows me to sort of take Darmok as like the keystone for it, I would love to do a video on Darmok, because Darmok is such a great episode. Oh, it's such a great episode. Let me see. Someone asked, let me see, I can't find it now. Oh, 255 AD said, where is Stuffy politically? Is he a sock dem or a dem sock? I think he's probably closer to a social democrat than a democratic socialist. Although he does have, I mean, he would not be, because Sanders identifies himself as a democratic socialist, right? So, but Stuffy is not a socialist in the sense, he doesn't favor like a socialist revolution. So he would not be a socialist in like the proper dictionary definition of a socialist. He would be a Democrat with socialistic leanings. Some Random Geek says, do you actually believe progress can happen without direct action and just voting and calling your lawmakers? Well, calling your lawmakers is a very low-key form of direct action. But no, I do think in certain cases, direct action is necessary. I think, like I said, I agree with Martin Luther King saying riots are the voice of the unheard. You know, there are times, and in particular historical situations and dealing with particular issues and particular injustices, where I think it is necessary for people to take to the streets, where I think direct action is necessary. But I also believe in representative democracy. And I believe the greatest function of direct action is to push representative democracy into doing what needs to be done. You know. Oh, David, you're not leaving that early because I'm wrapping it up here in a minute. Harry Garrison, let's make this the last question. Harry Garrison says, what was your all-time favorite SNL bit? Oh, God. All-time favorite SNL bit. My favorite recurring sketch was always What's Up With That, because that made me laugh every time I saw it, even though it was virtually exactly the same thing. What's Up With That almost always made me laugh every time I saw it. Other than that, there's a sketch that I've always remembered with Tim Robbins as a televangelist and Rob Schneider is the host, where it ends. It's only like the sketch is only like 2 or 3 minutes long, and it ends with Rob Schneider it ends with Tim Robbins punching Rob Schneider out of his chair. That for some reason has always stayed with me. John Ginger super chat says Henry Simmons from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. There you go. Now see, I've said before, I would do a Star Trek show with Henry Simmons as the star. Like, I would love to do a Star Trek show with just him as the lead character. I wasn't thinking of him as Cisco. I was just thinking of him as the lead in my show, and he would play a different character. But if you wanted to reboot DS9 and you wanted a new actor to play Cisco, he'd be great for it. I would love to see him as Cisco, but I was thinking of him as a different character for my dream hypothetical Star Trek show. But yeah, absolutely. Henry Simmons from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. would be fantastic. All right, so let's call this to a close now, my friends. I want to remind you that if you enjoy these things that I do here on YouTube, you can support me by going to patreon.com/Steve Shives and becoming a patron. And if you become a patron for any dollar amount, you can, one of the perks that you can enjoy is you can ask questions ahead of time for these Ask Away live streams, and I will answer all of the patron questions in the first part of the show before I turn to the live chat. So you get a guarantee that your question will be answered, assuming that you get it in before I start the show. And patreon.com/Steve Shives, you can support me and help me do all the Star Trek stuff. Also, I co-host a couple of podcasts as a part of the Let Me Listen family of podcasts: Late Seating, the movie review podcast, and the Ensign's Log, the Star Trek themed comedy podcast. I co-host both of them with the great Jason Harding. Jason is a lot like me, only he's a lot funnier and he does all the work on the podcasts. So that's all you really need to know. And new episode of the Ensign's Log just went up today. Most recent episode of Late Seating was our review of Superman Returns, which was mentioned in an earlier question. And next episode of Late Seating comes out next week, and that will be our review of Buckaroo Banzai, and we're recording that this weekend along with the following episode of the Ensign's Log. So there you go. That's all you need to know about the podcast. LetMeListenPodcast.com, and also links to subscribe and listen in various other ways in the description of the video. Also in the description of the video, there is a link to a Google Doc put together by our friend Some Random Geek, who has put together a group of charity links for some of our friends who need a little help, who are having some financial difficulty and maybe a little bit of a tight spot as far as money. So please click that link, go to that Google Doc, and think about helping out some of our friends who are listed there and in need of a helping hand. And if you can't afford to give them any money because you're in a bit of a tight spot yourself, maybe share some of the links on your social media and help spread the word, or share the link to the Google Doc on your social media and help, maybe some other people will see, and we'll be able to help out our friends who need a helping hand. So thank you all for doing that in advance. Thanks to everybody for watching. Thanks to everybody for being with me in the live chat. And hanging with me for almost 2 hours. These patrons keep asking more and more questions, and the shows just keep getting longer and longer. But it's always a lot of fun to be with you, to hang out with you and do these live streams. Thanks to everybody for being with me in the live chat and asking questions and making such fun, cool comments. Thanks to everybody for watching. Thanks to everybody, since I haven't mentioned it on an Ask Away yet, thanks to everybody who subscribes for letting me get that thing, because that is really cool. I just got that this week, and I did a video unboxing it, and I mentioned it in Facepalm 5 earlier this week, and I'll mention it now too. Thank you. If you're a subscriber to this channel, you have helped me to surpass 100,000 subs, and that's why they sent me that thing. So I really, really appreciate you. Thank you so much for allowing me to have this life that I have, doing YouTube videos for a living and talking about Star Trek and politics and making little miniature comedies with stuffed animals. Like, that's my job. And that would not be my job if it weren't for you all. So thank you all so much. Thank you for joining me, and I will see you next time. Please be safe and take care, everybody. See you.